An elegant airport becomes the stage for an unexpected spectacle, filled with power, vanity, and secrets. When a pregnant woman appears holding an envelope, the atmosphere shifts and cameras capture the beginning of something bigger. Within seconds, the mask of elegance falls and violence erupts before the entire world. But no one imagined that this video would become the spark of a global revolution for justice and truth. Heathrow International Airport buzzed that Thursday afternoon. Terminal 3, recently renovated, gleamed under the artificial light that reflected on the polished marble floor like a mirror. Dozens of people moved with luggage, cell phones glued to their ears, hurried glances towards the boarding gates. But in that specific corridor, near the VIP area, a different crowd was forming. Journalists adjusted cameras, reporters checked notes on tablets, photographers tested flashes. The anticipation was palpable in the air conditioning circulating through the environment. Maurice Anderson walked with firm, calculated steps. At 42, the Member of Parliament sported an impeccable navy blue suit, an Italian silk tie, and polished shoes that reflected the ceiling lights. His greying temples lent him an air of seriousness and experience that he carefully cultivated. Nationally known as the politician of renewal, Maurice had built his career on pillars of transparency, ethics, and the fight against corruption. His fiery speeches in Parliament sessions made headlines, his bills gained prominence in newspapers, his interviews reached millions of views on social media. Beside him, Valerie Campbell maintained a perfectly rehearsed professional smile. His communications advisor was a 35-year-old woman with straightened blonde hair falling over her shoulders, a tight red dress that accentuated her silhouette, and stiletto heels that made her walk with studied elegance. Valerie held a black executive folder and from time to time whispered instructions into Maurice's ear. She had been his shadow for 3 years, ever since he decided to aim for higher flights in national politics. She knew his schedules, his commitments, his secrets. "We are going to London to represent the United Kingdom at a historic conference," Maurice said loudly enough for the closest reporters to hear. "This partnership with the European coalition will bring billions in investments for the sustainable development of our country. It is an honor to carry the British flag to this meeting." Valerie adjusted the lapel microphone on his jacket, a gesture that had become routine, almost intimate. Her fingers lingered, a few seconds longer than necessary on the fabric. Maurice didn't seem to notice or pretended not to. Flashes fired like silent fireworks. Questions began to fly. "MP, is it true that you will be the official spokesperson for the British delegation?" A young reporter stretched her microphone towards him. Maurice smiled with the expression he had rehearsed countless times in front of the mirror. Calculated humility, just the right amount of confidence. "We will work as a team, as always. My commitment is to the British people, not to personal spotlights." More flashes, more questions. Valerie gently pushed away the more insistent journalists, clearing a path for Maurice to head towards the boarding gate. The clock showed 5:15. The flight was scheduled to depart at 6:30. There was still time, but the routine of politics demanded that everything be timed with military precision. It was then that a figure appeared at the end of the corridor, a woman of approximately 30, wearing a light beige fabric dress, brown hair tied in a ponytail, a visibly rounded belly under the dress. Camilla Foster walked slowly, one hand on her lower back, the other holding a light, brown folder. Her eyes searched for someone in the crowd. Tiredness marked her face, but there was determination in her steps. The sound of her low shoes on the marble was almost inaudible amidst the airport's hubbub, but something in her posture caught attention. Some heads turned. A reporter frowned, trying to identify who that woman was. Maurice, who was talking to a parliamentary aide about travel documents, stopped mid-sentence. His face hardened like concrete, his jaw clenched. His eyes, previously friendly to the cameras, became cold as steel. Valerie noticed the change instantly. She had an internal radar for anything that could affect Maurice's image. She followed his gaze and saw Camilla approaching. Her fingers tightened on the executive folder's strap. Her professional smile wavered for a fraction of a second before recomposing itself. But something different appeared in her eyes. It wasn't just professional concern. It was something more visceral. Jealousy. Camilla continued walking, ignoring the curious glances. She had received an email the previous morning. Official sender, Maurice Anderson's office address. The message was direct and urgent. They needed her signature on important documents before the MP's international trip. The maternity insurance form, something related to the baby she was expecting, something that couldn't wait. She had hesitated, thought about ignoring it, but the insistence in the email's tone convinced her. Just a signature, just a few minutes. Then she could go home, to the rented flat in the East End of London, and continue her life away from that world of appearances. "Maurice," she called, her voice clear, but without aggression. "I need to talk to you. It'll be quick." The MP didn't move. Instead, he crossed his arms over his chest. Valerie stepped forward, positioning herself between Camilla and Maurice like a human shield in a red dress and high heels. The atmosphere instantly changed. Journalists, with their keen instinct for conflict, began to pay more attention. Some cameras discreetly turned towards the scene. "Excuse me," Valerie said, her tone polite but sharp as a blade. "This is a private moment. If you have any matters to discuss, you can schedule them through the official channels of the office." Camilla blinked, confused. "I received an email asking me to come. I just need him to sign these documents. They're about the maternity insurance. It's urgent." Maternity insurance. The words echoed in the space between them. Some journalists exchanged glances. A more experienced reporter began connecting information in her mind, her journalistic instinct sounding alarms. Maurice remained motionless, but something in his face hardened even more. Valerie smiled, but it was a smile without warmth, purely mechanical. "How convenient," Valerie said, her voice now a tone higher, loud enough for others to hear. "The ex-partner appears just when there are cameras everywhere. What an interesting coincidence." Ex-partner. The word was dropped like a bomb in the middle of the corridor. Camilla felt the blood rush to her face. She opened her mouth to defend herself. "But," Valerie continued, relentless, "we know very well what you're trying to do here. Seek attention, create a scene, tarnish the reputation of an honorable man. But it won't work." Maurice finally spoke, his voice controlled but icy. "Camilla, you shouldn't be here. We've already talked about this. You made your choices." The cameras were now clearly focused on the trio. Flashes fired more frequently. Camilla felt the world spin around her. She hadn't made any choices other than believing there was something true in the relationship they had. She hadn't planned to appear in public. She didn't want attention. She just wanted to resolve a bureaucratic issue that affected her child's future. But now, before all those eyes, she felt exposed, vulnerable, like a cornered animal. "I only came because you asked me to," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "The email said it was urgent, that it needed to be today." Valerie laughed, a humorless sound. "Email? What email? Are you making up excuses now?" The confusion on Camilla's face was genuine. She pulled her cell phone from her pocket with trembling hands, looking for the message. But before she could show it, Valerie took another step towards her. The two were now very close. The air between them seemed electrified. Maurice watched everything with his arms still crossed, as if he were watching a play he wasn't a part of. "Do you really think you can come here and ruin everything?" Valerie hissed, her words low but laden with venom. "Do you think you can destroy what we've spent years building?" Camilla instinctively took a step back, but Valerie advanced. The stiletto heel hit the floor hard, and then, in a movement that seemed to happen in slow motion but lasted only a second, Valerie lifted her foot, and the heel struck Camilla's rounded abdomen. The sound was dry, an impact that cut the air like a whip. Camilla felt a sharp pain shoot through her body. The brown folder fell from her hands, the document scattering across the marble floor like dry leaves in the wind. Her knees buckled. She brought her hands to her belly, her eyes wide with shock and pain, and then, slowly, she began to fall. Camilla's body hit the floor with a muffled thud that echoed through the terminal. Around her, time seemed to freeze for an instant. The journalists stood paralyzed, processing what they had just witnessed. Then, like a dam breaking, chaos erupted. Screams, abrupt movements, cameras being raised, cell phones being pulled from pockets and bags. Everyone wanted to record that impossible moment. Camilla lay on her side, her hand still protecting her belly, her face contorted in pain. Her lips moved, trying to form words, but only a low moan escaped. The papers around her formed an irregular circle, as if demarcating the territory of the tragedy. A maternity insurance form lay face up, the company logo visible to anyone close enough. Maurice remained motionless for 3, 4, 5 seconds. His eyes fixed on Camilla on the floor, but his body rigid as a statue. Valerie had retreated a few steps, the expression of horror on her face battling against the need to maintain composure. She looked at her own red shoe, then at Camilla, then at the cameras. The reality of what she had just done began to penetrate the armor of her professional coolness. A woman from the airport cleaning staff was the first to react. She dropped her product cart and ran towards Camilla, kneeling beside her. "Miss, can you hear me? Are you all right? The baby?" It was then that Maurice finally moved, but not to help. He raised a hand, his voice firm and authoritative. "Wait. Don't touch her yet. She's faking it. It's a setup." The words fell like bombs in the midst of the commotion. Several people turned to face him, incredulous. The cleaning lady completely ignored the order and continued trying to help Camilla, asking someone to call the airport's medical team. But Maurice insisted, now walking towards the small circle forming around the fallen woman. "Don't you see?" he said, pointing at Camilla, as if presenting evidence in a courtroom. "She appeared here precisely when the press is around, precisely when I'm about to embark on an important mission. This is calculated. She wants to harm me." "MP," a reporter asked, her voice tense. "But we saw what happened. Your advisor assaulted her." "It was an accident," Maurice replied quickly, his mask beginning to crack but still resisting. "An involuntary movement. Valerie was just defending herself from an intrusion." Valerie, still standing a few meters behind, seemed to be in shock. Her hands trembled. Her perfect red lipstick now contrasted with the pallor of her face. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Her brain worked frantically, trying to find a way out, an explanation, a way to reverse the irreversible. But it was too late. Among the crowd of curious onlookers that was beginning to form, a young man of approximately 20 held his cell phone vertically. Gabriel Spencer was a journalism student. He was at the airport to pick up his grandmother returning from the north of England, but his professional instinct had made him pull out his phone at the exact moment he witnessed the tension between the three people. He had filmed everything, every word, every movement, every second of that brutal scene, and more importantly, he was live streaming. The live stream already had almost 1,000 views, and the number was rising rapidly. Comments exploded on the screen, people tagging friends, sharing the link, expressing shock and indignation. Gabriel kept his phone steady, quietly narrating what was happening, his voice trembling but determined to document everything. Finally, the airport's medical team arrived running with a stretcher and a first aid kit. 2 paramedics, a man and a woman, knelt beside Camilla. "Madam, can you hear me? Where does it hurt? Can you tell me your name?" "Camilla," she whispered, her voice weak. "My baby, please, my baby." The female paramedic began checking vital signs, while her colleague asked everyone to step back and give them space. Maurice tried to approach again, but an airport security guard stopped him with a firm gesture. "Sir, please let the professionals work." "You don't understand," Maurice insisted, his voice now carrying a thinly veiled tone of desperation. "This woman is lying. She wants to harm me. You're falling for a setup." But no one else was listening. The paramedics worked efficiently, checking Camilla's blood pressure, asking questions about her pregnancy, how many weeks if she had any previous complications. Camilla responded with difficulty, tears streaming down her face. The pain in her abdomen was intense, a cramping that came in waves. She was afraid, a visceral fear that something terrible might happen to her child. Valerie finally approached Maurice, touching his arm. Her voice came out in a desperate whisper. "Maurice, we need to get out of here. Now." He stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. Something in his eyes changed, a mixture of anger and fear. "You did this," he said softly, only for her to hear. "You ruined everything." Before Valerie could respond, the flashes restarted with full force. The journalists now asked direct, accusatory questions. MP, will you assist the victim? Do you confirm you had a relationship with this woman? Is she really pregnant with your child? Why did your advisor attack her? Questions came from all sides like arrows. Maurice tried to maintain composure, but his face betrayed his growing panic. Valerie held the executive folder against her chest as if it were a shield, her eyes searching for an escape route. Gabriel's live broadcast now had over 50,000 people watching. The social media algorithm had picked up the massive engagement and started boosting the video. Hashtags emerged spontaneously. Justice for Camilla. MP Morris. Airport violence. The entire UK was beginning to learn what was happening in Terminal 3 of Heathrow. The paramedics decided to transport Camilla immediately to the nearest hospital. They carefully placed her on the stretcher, stabilizing her neck and rechecking her vital signs. The cleaning lady, who had been the first to assist her, held Camilla's hand, murmuring words of comfort. "It's going to be okay, dear. You are strong. Your baby is strong." As the stretcher was pushed towards the emergency exit, Gabriel continued filming. He captured the moment Camilla turned her face back, looking for Morris with her eyes. Her expression was not one of anger, but of deep incomprehension. "How did we get here?" her gaze seemed to ask. "How did everything fall apart so quickly?" Maurice did not look back. He was now surrounded by reporters, security guards, and curious onlookers. Valerie tried to push her way through, shoving people, but it was useless. They were trapped in that circle of public judgment. The flight to London was scheduled to depart in an hour, but both knew they wouldn't make it in time. More importantly, they knew they would never board that plane. A man in a grey suit approached. He was Morris's lawyer, summoned by message as soon as the situation began to spiral out of control. "Mr. Anderson," he said softly, "we need to talk immediately. Don't say anything else to the press. Absolutely nothing." Maurice nodded mechanically, allowing himself to be guided to a private room at the airport. Valerie followed him, her legs trembling in her high heels. Behind them, the murmur of the crowd continued to grow. Metropolitan police officers began to arrive, alerted by airport security personnel about the incident. Witnesses were identified. Statements began to be taken. In the private room, Maurice sank into a chair, his head in his hands. Valerie stood, leaning against the wall, staring into nothing. The lawyer closed the door and turned to them. His expression was grave. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" he asked, his voice sharp. "This is being live-streamed. Millions of people saw everything, millions." "It was an accident," Valerie murmured, but her voice lacked conviction. "It was an automatic defense." Empty words she herself didn't believe. "It doesn't matter," the lawyer replied. "What matters is perception, and the perception is devastating. You've just become the most hated villains in the UK in a matter of minutes." Morris lifted his head, his eyes red. "I built my entire career on ethics, on transparency. How am I going to explain this?" The lawyer didn't answer. There was no answer. Both knew that explanations would no longer matter. The truth was captured on video, circulating on the internet, being shared millions of times. The empire of reputation that Maurice had built for years was crumbling in real time. Less than 2 miles away, on the exclusive runway for private jets, a silver Gulfstream touched the asphalt with the precision of someone who belonged to that world of luxury and power. The plane taxied smoothly to its designated position, the engines gradually slowing to silence. The door opened, the stairs unfolded, and from inside emerged a man who radiated authority with every step. Robert Foster was 68, with completely white hair combed back, bespoke suits that cost more than a popular car. A retired businessman, he had built an empire in the construction sector, erecting skyscrapers that defined the London skyline, accumulating a fortune that placed him among the richest men in the UK. But none of that mattered at that moment, because Robert had just watched, still inside the plane's cabin, the video that his trusted former employee had sent him with the urgent message. He descended the stairs with firm steps despite his age. His driver and personal security, Wilson, was already waiting for him with the car, but Robert gestured for him to wait. He took his cell phone from his jacket pocket and watched the video again. Every second was a stab. The image of his daughter Camilla, being assaulted and falling to the ground. The MP's words, cold and calculated, accusing her of faking it. The indifference with which he watched her suffer. Robert and Camilla had been estranged for over a year. A terrible fight about her life choices, about the relationship she had with that politician, about the path she was taking. Robert disapproved of everything. He thought Maurice was false, opportunistic, a man who used beautiful words to hide dubious intentions. But Camilla was stubborn. She had inherited that from him. She insisted her father was wrong, that Maurice was different, that she knew how to take care of her own life. The discussion escalated until harsh words were spoken on both sides. Robert had said that as long as she insisted on that relationship, she could no longer count on his support. Camilla replied that she didn't need him, that she would build her life alone, and so they separated. But a father never stops being a father. Robert had kept his eyes and ears open, discreetly through trusted people. He knew Camilla was pregnant. He knew Maurice had distanced himself from her as soon as the pregnancy was announced. He knew his daughter was facing everything alone in a modest flat in the East End, working as a freelance lawyer to pay the bills. Every piece of information he received was a needle in his pride and in his heart. But he was stubborn too. He waited for her to make the first move, to admit he was right, to come back asking for forgiveness. Now, seeing those images, Robert realized how foolish he had been. His pride, his need to be right, all of it was insignificant in the face of the pain he saw on his daughter's face. Marcia Spencer, his former personal secretary who now worked in Maurice's office, had risked her own job to send that video from the internal security cameras. The accompanying message was direct. "Mr. Foster, Camilla is in danger. They set everything up. The email was sent on purpose to bring her to the airport. She needs you." Robert closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. When he opened them, they were the eyes of a general going into battle. "Wilson," he said, his voice deep and controlled, "take me to Terminal 3 now." The car covered the distance in minutes. Robert didn't take his eyes off his phone, following the live broadcast that was now on all news portals. The number of views exceeded millions. Comments of indignation multiplied like an avalanche. He saw the moment Camilla was placed on the stretcher, saw the pain etched on her face, and felt something break inside him. Upon arriving at the terminal, Wilson tried to open the door for Robert, but he had already stepped out on his own, walking towards the concourse with steps that made the floor tremble. People turned to look, vaguely recognizing that face that had graced business magazine covers. He paid no attention to any of it. His eyes scanned the environment until he located the epicenter of the commotion. The crowd was still concentrated in the area where the incident had occurred. Metropolitan police officers talked to witnesses. Journalists continued filming and reporting live. Robert advanced, and something in his presence made people instinctively step aside. It was as if an invisible force preceded him, clearing a path. "Where is my daughter?" Robert's voice cut through the air like thunder. The hubbub instantly subsided. Heads turned. A heavy silence descended upon the place. One of the Metropolitan police officers approached, trying to maintain protocol. "Sir, who are you?" "Robert Foster. And the woman who was assaulted here is my daughter, Camilla Foster. Where is she?" The officer quickly consulted his clipboard. "She was taken to St. Thomas's Hospital for emergency care, sir. We can arrange transport if you wish to accompany her." "Arrange it," Robert ordered. "But first, I want to see the recordings, all of them. Sir, that's evidence in an investigation. We can't just show it." Robert turned completely to the officer, his grey eyes fixing on his with an intensity that made the young officer involuntarily take a step back. "My daughter was cowardly assaulted. I have the right to know exactly what happened. Now, or I will make a call to people who will make your professional life very complicated." It was not an empty threat. Robert knew senators, ministers, commanders. A call from him could indeed cause problems. The officer swallowed hard and looked at his superior, who was a few meters behind. The superior nodded briefly. "Very well, Mr. Foster, this way." They led him to a security room where several monitors displayed different angles of the airport. A technician began to rewind the recordings to the moment of the incident. Robert watched in silence, his fists clenched at his sides. He saw Camilla arriving, tired but determined. He saw the folder with documents. He saw the immediate tension in Maurice. He saw Valerie's poorly disguised jealousy. He saw the words being exchanged, the tone escalating, and then the horrible moment when the heel struck his daughter's abdomen. "Repeat that part," Robert asked, his voice strangely calm. The technician obeyed. The scene repeated in slow motion. The deliberate movement, the impact, the fall. There was no doubt. It was not an accident. It was pure, calculated aggression. Robert closed his eyes briefly, controlling the wave of fury that threatened to explode. "Where are the accused?" he asked. "In a private room with their lawyer, sir. We are still collecting statements before taking any official measures." "Take me to them." "Sir, I don't think that's appropriate." Robert turned, and something in his expression made the officer immediately fall silent. "Take me to them. Now." The small entourage walked through corridors until they reached the door of the private room. Robert did not knock. He simply opened the door and entered. Maurice, Valerie, and the lawyer turned, surprised. For a moment no one said anything. Maurice recognized Robert instantly, his face paling as if he had seen a ghost. "Mr. Foster," the lawyer began, trying to regain control of the situation. "This is a delicate moment and—" "Shut up," Robert interrupted, without even looking at him. His eyes were fixed on Maurice. "You," he said, pointing at the MP, "you seduced my daughter with your pretty words. You promised her the world, and when she got pregnant, when she needed you, you abandoned her like a coward, and today you had the audacity to call her to the airport to publicly humiliate her." "It wasn't like that," Maurice tried to defend himself, but his voice was weak. "It was a misunderstanding. I didn't know she would come. Don't insult me with lies." Robert took a step forward, and Maurice instinctively recoiled. "I saw the recordings. I saw everything. The email was sent from your office. You planned this." Valerie finally found her voice, trying to deflect blame. "It was an accident. I didn't mean to hurt her. She approached aggressively, and I just defended myself." Robert turned to her slowly, like a predator assessing its prey. "You," he said, his voice low but laden with disdain. "You attacked her because you're jealous, because you know that as long as my daughter exists, you will never completely have that pathetic man by your side." Valerie opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Tears began to form in her eyes. The naked truth of her motivations had been exposed without mercy. Maurice looked at the floor, unable to meet Robert's gaze. The lawyer tried one more time. "Mr. Foster, I understand your indignation, but threats won't help anyone here. We need to resolve this civilly." Robert finally looked at the lawyer. "Civilly?" he repeated as if the word were absurd. "My daughter is hospitalized, possibly losing the child she carries because of these two. And you want to talk about civility?" Heavy silence filled the room. Robert took a deep breath, composing himself. When he spoke again, his voice had returned to that dangerous calm. "You think political power protects from consequences. You think public image can be rebuilt. But I will teach you a lesson you will never forget. The truth doesn't need makeup. It imposes itself, and the whole world has already seen your truth." Robert left that room, leaving a deathly silence behind him. His words had fallen like sentences from an implacable judge. Maurice remained seated, his head bowed, while Valerie cowered against the wall. The lawyer tried to formulate some plan of action, but both knew the damage was irreparable. The video continued to spread across social media like an uncontrolled wildfire. International portals were already beginning to cover the story. British politician and airport scandal were headlines popping up in various languages. Wilson drove Robert to the hospital at a controlled but urgent speed. Throughout the journey, Robert remained silent, looking out the window at the streets of London passing by. His mind worked in multiple directions. Part of him wanted to go back to that room and do much more than just talk. Another part, the one that still maintained some rationality, knew that he needed to focus on what really mattered now. Camilla, the baby, his family that he had neglected out of foolish pride. St. Thomas's Hospital was one of the best medical institutions in the city. Robert arrived and was immediately recognized by the administrative staff. After all, he had funded an entire wing years ago. The medical director came personally to greet him. "Mr. Foster, your daughter is in the care of our best obstetric team. She has been taken for emergency examinations." "How is she?" Robert asked, and for the first time in decades his voice carried genuine vulnerability. "Stable at the moment, but we need to assess thoroughly. The impact was on the abdominal region. We are monitoring the baby's heart rate." The doctor paused, choosing her words carefully. "She is very emotionally shaken. She keeps asking about the baby, if he's okay." "Can I see her?" "As soon as we finish the initial exams, sir. Perhaps 40 minutes or so." Robert nodded and was led to a VIP waiting room. There, alone, he finally allowed the emotions he had repressed to surface. He sat heavily in a leather armchair and covered his face with his hands. Images of Camilla's childhood flooded his mind, the joyful girl who ran through the mansion, who climbed onto his lap asking for stories, who made him laugh with her impossible questions. When his wife had died in an accident, when Camilla was only 12, he had promised himself he would protect his daughter from everything, but in the process of trying to protect her, he ended up pushing her away. Robert's cell phone vibrated constantly. Messages from businessmen, politicians, journalists wanting statements. He ignored them all. After a few minutes, only one message caught his attention. It was from Marcia Spencer, his former secretary. "Mr. Foster, I hope Camilla is well. You need to know something. I found more evidence. Can I send it?" Robert typed quickly. "Send everything." In a few seconds, files began to arrive. Screenshots of conversations between Maurice and Valerie. Messages exchanged via an encrypted communication app, but which Marcia had managed to access using credentials she still held from when she worked for Robert and occasionally consulted for the office. The conversations were shocking in their coldness. "We need to keep her away from the media," Maurice had written 3 weeks ago. "If the pregnancy becomes public now, my image will suffer. The opposition will use it against me." Valerie replied, "What if we create a situation where she appears unstable, where people doubt her?" More messages followed this line, plans being drawn up, scenarios being discussed. And then, 2 days before, the crucial message, Valerie suggesting, "I'll have my assistant send an email from the office asking her to go to the airport. We'll say she needs to sign urgent documents. With all the press there for your trip, if she shows up, it will look like a desperate attempt for attention." Maurice had replied with a thoughtful emoji, and then, "Are you sure this will work? It can't look like it came from us." "It will work," Valerie assured. "And when she shows up, I'll deal with her. In front of the cameras, I'll make it clear that she's a problematic ex trying to sabotage your career. The narrative will be in our favor." Robert felt nauseous reading that. Everything had been calculated. Camilla was lured into a public trap. The intention was to humiliate her, destroy her credibility before she could become a problem for Maurice's political image. What Valerie hadn't planned was to lose control and physically assault her. But even that, in her distorted mind, probably seemed justifiable in the heat of the moment. The medical director returned earlier than expected. "Mr. Foster, your daughter is asking for you. She needs family support. Now." Robert immediately stood up, putting away his phone. "How is the baby?" "The heartbeats are stable, but there are premature contractions. We need to keep her under strict observation. There is a risk of premature birth if the contractions don't cease. She is 32 weeks, so there are good chances of survival if the baby is born now, but obviously we want to avoid that if possible." "Take me to her," Robert requested. The room was spacious and quiet, medical equipment constantly monitoring vital signs. Camilla lay connected to IVs and monitors, a device strapped to her belly recording the baby's heartbeats. Her face was pale with dried tear marks on her cheeks. When she saw her father enter, her eyes widened. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then, Camilla began to cry. Robert approached quickly, taking her hand in his. "It's all right, daughter. I'm here. You're safe." "Father," she sobbed, her voice broken. "I'm so sorry. You were right about him. You were always right. And I was so stubborn, so stupid." "No," Robert interrupted her, his own voice choked. "I was the stubborn one. I was the stupid one. You are my daughter, and I should have been by your side regardless of your choices. I failed you." Camilla squeezed her father's hand tightly. "The baby," she said, fear evident in every word. "They told me he's fine. But what if something happens? What if because of me?" "Nothing will happen," Robert said firmly, wiping his daughter's tears with his thumb. "You are receiving the best medical care possible, and I will stay here with you, every second. I won't leave your side." Camilla closed her eyes, new tears streaming. For a long moment they just stayed there, father and daughter reunited after so long. The monitor continued its rhythmic beep, the reassuring sound of the baby's heartbeats filling the silence. After a few minutes, a nurse came in to check signs and adjust medication. "The contractions are decreasing," she informed with a gentle smile. "That's a good sign. Keep resting, dear." When they were alone again, Camilla looked at her father. "What happened after I left the airport? In the ambulance I was so dizzy, I couldn't process anything properly." Robert hesitated, deciding how much to tell at that moment. But Camilla deserved to know the truth. "I saw everything, daughter. I saw the recordings, and I found out they planned everything. The email that brought you there, the public humiliation, everything was calculated to destroy your credibility." Camilla processed that slowly, incredulity giving way to painful understanding. "So she began, her voice failing. "He really hated me that much." "It wasn't about you," Robert explained softly. "It was about his image, about power. People like that love no one but themselves. You were just an obstacle in the perfect narrative he built." A cold anger began to replace the sadness in Camilla's eyes. "I trusted him. I believed every word. I thought we were partners, that we would build something together. I know, daughter, and you're not to blame for trusting him. The blame is entirely his for betraying that trust." Camilla looked at her belly, caressing it gently. "And now? What happens now?" Robert took a deep breath. "Now we focus on you and the baby, on recovering, on bringing my grandson into the world safely. As for the rest, justice will take its course. The evidence is undeniable. The whole world saw it. They won't escape the consequences." "But my life, my privacy, everything was exposed. How will I deal with this?" "One day at a time," Robert said, squeezing her hand again. "And you won't deal with it alone. I will be by your side, always." Camilla nodded slowly, emotional and physical exhaustion finally taking its toll. Her eyes began to close. Robert continued to sit by the bed holding her hand, watching her fall asleep. For the first time in a long time, he felt he was doing what he should have done from the start, protecting his daughter, not controlling her life, but supporting her unconditionally. 3 weeks had passed since the airport incident. The entire UK followed every development of the case as if it were a real-life drama. The hashtags never left the trending topics. Television programs dedicated hours to debates about abuse of power, violence against women, and ethics in politics. Maurice Anderson and Valerie Campbell became the most hated faces in the country practically overnight. Camilla had remained hospitalized for 5 days. The contractions ceased with appropriate medication, and miraculously, the baby suffered no apparent harm. When she was discharged, Robert took her not to the modest flat in the East End, but to the family mansion in Hampstead. The same place she had left swearing never to return. But now the circumstances were completely different. There were no impositions, no judgments, only a father's desire to care for his daughter at the moment she needed him most. During these days, Robert hired the best legal team in London, not to sue for monetary damages, although that was inevitable, but to ensure that justice was done completely and transparently. The messages Marcia had obtained were handed over to the authorities. The Metropolitan Police opened a formal investigation. The Crown Prosecution Service publicly commented on the seriousness of the case. Maurice and Valerie had been detained at the airport that fateful night. They spent the night at the police station, were photographed, and remained in custody until their bail hearing the next day. The judge, pressured by the international repercussions of the case and the gravity of the evidence, ordered their pre-trial detention. They were transferred to different establishments, awaiting trial. Maurice's defense tried everything. They argued that he had committed no physical act against Camilla, that he could not be held responsible for Valerie's actions. But the prosecution presented the messages showing the prior conspiracy. He had planned the public humiliation. He had created the situation that led to the assault. He was a co-perpetrator by omission and by planning. Furthermore, his refusal to render aid, clearly documented in the videos, constituted an additional offense. The trial was scheduled to take place at the Old Bailey, and anticipation was enormous. Journalists from around the world requested credentials to cover the case. The presiding judge, Judge Helen Murray, a 50-year-old woman known for her strictness and impartiality, decided that the trial would be live-streamed, given the public relevance of the case. On the morning of the trial, a crowd gathered in front of the Old Bailey. Signs demanded justice for Camilla. Feminist groups organized peaceful demonstrations. The police had to set up a strong security scheme. Robert arrived early with Camilla, now 35 weeks pregnant, her belly visibly larger. She wore a light blue dress, her hair down without excessive makeup. She wanted them to see who she really was, an ordinary woman who had been a victim of a cruel plan. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. Maurice entered escorted, wearing a simple suit very different from the elegance he usually displayed. His face was pale with deep, dark circles. Under his eyes, the weight of the situation clearly marked on his features. He avoided looking in Camilla's direction. Valerie entered shortly after, and the transformation in her was even more dramatic. Her blonde hair was lifeless, her makeup-free face revealing her true age and stress. She also kept her eyes downcast. The judge entered, and everyone stood. "You may be seated," she said, her firm voice echoing through the hall. "We will begin the trial of case number, fictional number, in which the Crown Prosecution Service accuses Maurice Anderson and Valerie Campbell of aggravated assault and failure to render aid." The prosecutor, Ferdinand Allen, an experienced grey-haired man, rose. "Your Honor, this case has shocked our nation. We have unequivocal evidence that the defendants planned a trap to publicly humiliate the victim, who was 32 weeks pregnant at the time. The private conversations we obtained show premeditation. The multi-angle videos show the physical assault and the subsequent refusal to provide aid. This court needs to send a clear message that abuse of power and violence against women will not be tolerated." Maurice's defense argued that the messages were taken out of context, that there was no intention to cause physical harm, that everything was a terrible misunderstanding. But every word sounded hollow in the face of the evidence. Valerie's lawyer attempted the emotional instability route, claiming she acted under intense psychological pressure, that she was in internal conflict due to jealousy, that she had no control over her actions. Then it was time to present the witnesses. The cleaning lady who first helped Camilla gave an emotional testimony. "She was on the floor, asking for help for the baby, and that man there," she pointed to Morris, "stood there saying she was faking it. How can someone be so cold?" Gabriel Spencer, the journalism student who filmed everything live, also testified. "My broadcast reached millions because people recognized the injustice happening in real time. It wasn't faking. It was a woman being assaulted and abandoned by someone who should have protected her." The doctors who treated Camilla technically explained the risks she ran, how the impact could have caused placental abruption, fetal distress, extreme premature birth. "It was a miracle," one of them said, "that both mother and baby emerged physically unharmed. The psychological trauma, however, is another story." When it was Camilla's turn to testify, the silence in the courtroom was absolute. She stood with her father's help, walked to the witness stand. The judge observed her with a compassionate but professional expression. "Miss Foster, can you tell us in your own words what happened that day?" Camilla took a deep breath, her hands on her belly. "I received an email from the office saying I needed to sign urgent documents related to the baby's insurance. I believed it was something necessary, and went. When I arrived, I immediately sensed the tension. I tried to explain that I just wanted to resolve the issue and leave. But she," Camilla glanced briefly at Valerie, "accused me of trying to get attention, said humiliating things in front of everyone, and then she attacked me." Camilla's voice trembled, but she continued. "What hurt me most wasn't even the physical pain, but seeing the man I had loved, who was my child's father, standing there while I was on the floor. He called me a liar, said I was faking it, ordered no one to help me. At that moment, I realized I never truly knew him." Tears streamed silently down Camilla's face. Robert, sitting in the front row, clenched his fists. To maintain composure, the judge allowed a few seconds of silence before asking, "And how has this affected your life since then?" "I wake up in the middle of the night with nightmares," Camilla confessed. "I'm afraid to leave the house, that people will recognize me from the internet. I had to withdraw from my postgraduate law degree because I couldn't concentrate. I live in constant anxiety about my baby's health, even though the doctors say everything is fine. They didn't just hurt me physically, they destroyed my peace." The defense had its opportunity to cross-examine, but any attempt to discredit Camilla fell flat in the face of the evident sincerity in her words. Maurice was also called to testify. His voice was low, almost inaudible. He repeated the same line of defense. He planned nothing, thought she was creating a scene, acted based on a wrong assessment of the situation. "Mr. Anderson," the judge interrupted, her voice sharp, "we have written messages from you planning exactly this situation. How do you explain that?" Maurice stammered, trying to formulate a response. "They were just venting. They didn't mean we would actually do anything." "Then explain the email sent from your office summoning Miss Foster." Maurice looked at his lawyer, seeking support, but found none. "It was an assistant who took liberties. I didn't authorize it directly." "But you also didn't stop it," the judge observed. "And when your advisor assaulted a pregnant woman in front of you, you not only failed to stop her, but you actively discouraged others from helping her. This is documented on video from multiple angles, correct?" Maurice did not respond. He simply lowered his head. Valerie, when her turn came, completely broke down. Between sobs, she confessed that she acted out of jealousy, that she lost control, that she never imagined she would do something like that. But her words found no sympathy in the court. Late repentance does not erase the act. After 2 days of intense trial, the moment of the verdict arrived. Judge Helen Murray stood up, holding the document with the sentence. "This court has carefully analyzed all the evidence presented. The videos are unequivocal. The messages demonstrate premeditation. The testimonies confirm the gravity of the facts. Therefore, I declare Maurice Anderson and Valerie Campbell guilty of the offenses of aggravated assault and failure to render aid." A murmur ran through the hall. Maurice closed his eyes. Valerie began to cry openly. The judge continued, impassive. "The sentence is 4 years imprisonment in a closed regime for each of the defendants, without the right to appeal on bail given the seriousness of the case and the risk to public order. Furthermore, I determine the payment of compensation for moral and material damages to the victim in an amount to be calculated later. This session is adjourned." The judge's gavel echoed through the courtroom like a definitive final punctuation mark. Camilla felt the weight she had carried for weeks finally begin to dissolve. It wasn't exactly joy, but a kind of profound relief. Justice didn't bring back lost time or erase emotional scars, but it offered closure, a possibility to move forward without the burden of impunity weighing on her shoulders. Robert placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "It's over," he murmured. "Now we can focus on what really matters." Camilla nodded, tears streaming freely. But they were different tears from those she had shed in recent weeks. They were not of pain or fear, but of liberation, as if one door had finally closed, allowing another to open. Outside, the Courthouse. The crowd applauded when Camilla emerged with her father. They were not applause of revenge, but of solidarity. Women of all ages held signs. "We are with you, Camilla. Your courage inspires. Justice prevails." She paused for a moment, observing those faces, and for the first time she felt that her pain had transformed into something greater. It wasn't just about her. It was about all the women who had been silenced, discredited, attacked. A reporter approached respectfully. "Miss Foster, how do you feel at this moment?" Camilla paused, choosing her words carefully. "I feel gratitude, for justice, for the support, for the people who didn't leave me alone. And I feel responsibility, because what happened to me happens to women every day. But without cameras, without visibility, without justice, I want that to change." Camilla's words were reproduced in all the news. In the following weeks, while recovering at her father's mansion, she began to receive messages from women across the UK. Stories of abuse, domestic violence, of systems that failed to protect them. Each account was a stab to the heart, but also a call to action. "Father," Camilla said one morning as they had coffee on the veranda, "I need to do something. I can't just move on with my life and pretend none of this happened." Robert placed his coffee cup on the table, observing his daughter carefully. "What do you have in mind?" "I want to create an organization, a place where women at risk can find legal, psychological, financial support, where they don't feel alone or helpless, where they can rebuild their lives with dignity." Robert smiled, a genuine smile of pride. "That's very ambitious, daughter. It will require structure, resources, time." "I know," Camilla replied, determination evident in her eyes. "And that's why I need your help. Not just financially, but with your experience in building things from scratch." Robert didn't have to think twice. "You have my full support. We'll make it happen." In the following weeks, as Camilla entered her final month of pregnancy, they worked together on the project. Robert made available a property he owned in Islington, an old commercial building that could be renovated. They hired architects to adapt the space to the organization's needs. Rooms for psychological counseling, offices for lawyers, common areas, even a small children's playground. Camilla, even with the physical limitations of advanced pregnancy, was involved in every decision. She chose the organization's name, Hope Over Fear. 3 simple words that summarized everything she had learned. Fear paralyzes, but hope moves. Fear isolates, but hope connects. Fear destroys, but hope rebuilds. Marcia Spencer, Robert's former secretary who had been instrumental in exposing the truth, volunteered to help with the organization's administration. She brought management experience and a deep sense of justice. Other women also volunteered. Psychologists, lawyers, social workers, all wanting to contribute to something greater. On a sunny afternoon, with only 10 days left until her due date, Camilla was at the future headquarters of the organization, supervising the final details of the renovation. A sign was already being installed at the entrance. Hope Over Fear, in golden letters on a blue background. She caressed her belly, feeling the baby kick. "We're going to make a difference in many people's lives," she murmured to her son. "We're going to show that purpose can be born from pain." Robert watched her from afar, talking to the contractors. Something had changed in him too. The cold, distant magnate who prioritized business above all else had given way to a more human, more present man. He realized that fortune meant nothing if it wasn't used for causes that truly mattered. He decided to donate half of his assets to the foundation, ensuring it would have resources to operate for decades. The next night, Camilla woke up with strong contractions. Labor had begun. Robert immediately took her to St. Thomas's Hospital, the same one where she had been treated after the incident. But this time it was different. There was no fear, only expectation. Pain, yes, but the transformative pain that brings life. After 8 hours of labor on a sunny Thursday morning, Michael Foster was born. 3 kilos and 200 grams, 50 centimeters, powerful lungs that announced his arrival into the world with a strong, healthy cry. Camilla held him for the first time and felt something complete within her. All the pains, all the fears, all the tears had been worth it. There in her arms was living proof that she was stronger than she ever imagined. Robert entered the room after the first moments between mother and child, and upon seeing his grandson for the first time, the tears he had repressed for decades finally fell freely. "May I?" he asked, extending his arms. Camilla carefully placed Michael in his grandfather's arms. "Look at him, father. Look at the perfection." Robert looked at that small face, his tiny eyes still closed, his minute hands. "Welcome to the world, Michael," he whispered. "You were born into a family that will love and protect you always." The days at the hospital were peaceful. Camilla recovered well. Michael nursed without difficulty, gaining weight appropriately. Visitors came in a steady stream. Marcia brought flowers. Some of the women who had volunteered to work at the foundation came to meet the baby who symbolized so much. Even the airport cleaning lady, Mrs. Lucy, showed up with a gift, a blue teddy bear and a note, "For the little warrior, son of an even greater warrior." When they were finally discharged, Robert had a surprise prepared. The organization's headquarters was completely ready. The renovation had been accelerated during the period Camilla was in the hospital. Everything was impeccable. The rooms equipped, the furniture in place, a small library with books on women's rights, overcoming trauma, child development. Camilla entered holding Michael in her arms, her eyes filling with tears once more. "It's perfect, Father. Exactly as I imagined." "There's one more thing," Robert said, leading her to a specific room. He opened the door, revealing a cozy space with a nursing armchair, a crib, educational toys. "Your office. I thought you'd like to have a place where you could work and still be close to Michael." Camilla hugged her father with one arm, the other still holding the baby. "Thank you for everything, for coming back into my life, for supporting me, for believing in me." "I thank you," Robert replied, his voice choked. "You gave me a second chance to be the father I should have always been. You taught me that true power is not to control but to care." They spent the rest of that afternoon at the headquarters, planning the next steps. The foundation would be officially inaugurated in 3 months, enough time for Camilla to adapt to motherhood. They had already received dozens of requests for help. Women who needed legal assistance to prosecute aggressors, single mothers who needed support to rebuild their lives, teenagers who were victims of domestic violence who needed safe shelter. At night, when they returned to the mansion, Camilla laid Michael in the crib they had prepared in, the room next to hers. She spent a few minutes just watching her son sleep, his breathing soft, his face peaceful. She thought about everything she had gone through to get there. The abusive relationship, the unplanned pregnancy, the abandonment, the public humiliation, the assault, the trial. Each stage had been painful, but also transformative. She was no longer that naive woman who blindly believed in empty promises. She was no longer the rebellious daughter who distanced herself from her father out of pride. She was no longer the silent victim who passively accepted injustices. She had become someone who understood that vulnerability is not weakness, that asking for help is courage, that from the deepest pain can be born the most significant purpose. 6 months had passed since Michael's birth. Spring painted London with vibrant colours, flowers blooming in the gardens, the air laden with promises of renewal. The Hope Over Fear Foundation headquarters was fully operational. Every day, dozens of women crossed that door seeking help, and all found warmth, respect, and resources to rebuild their lives. Camilla was in her office one Thursday morning, Michael sleeping peacefully in the crib next to her desk. She was reviewing a legal case that the foundation's legal team was handling. A 40-year-old woman had been assaulted by her ex-partner and needed urgent protection. The foundation not only provided specialized lawyers, but also temporary shelter, psychological support, and professional training courses so she could become financially independent. A knock on the door interrupted her concentration. "Come in," Camilla said, adjusting the glasses she now wore for work. Marcia entered with a folder in her hands and a smile on her face. "Camilla, we have good news. The bill you proposed on comprehensive protection for pregnant women victims of violence has just been approved by the London Assembly. It's the first region in the UK to have such a specific law. Camilla stood up quickly, her hands going to her chest. "Seriously? We did it?" "We did it," Marcia confirmed, extending the folder with the documents. "And there's more. 6 other regions have already expressed interest in replicating the legislation. Your case had a national impact, Camilla. It changed the way people view violence against pregnant women." Camilla took the documents, her eyes scanning the lines as tears of gratitude formed. When she had decided to turn her pain into action, she never imagined the reach would be so great. The law provided for more severe penalties for assaults against pregnant women, immediate police protection, state-guaranteed medical follow-up, and mandatory psychological support. It was everything she wished she had had access to when she was most vulnerable. "This will save lives," Camilla murmured, her voice choked. "It will prevent other women from going through what I went through." "And it's just the beginning," Marcia said. "The Foundation is receiving invitations to expand to other cities. Manchester, Birmingham, Edinburgh. They all want to implement the comprehensive care model we developed here." That afternoon, Camilla was scheduled to give a lecture at the University of London. The auditorium was packed with over 500 students, professors, and activists. When she stepped onto the stage holding Michael in her arms, because he was still too small to be away for too long, the audience rose in prolonged applause. "Good afternoon, everyone," Camilla began, her voice clear despite the emotion. "A year ago, I was in one of the darkest moments of my life. I had been attacked, discredited, publicly exposed, my privacy destroyed, my dignity trampled. Many times lying in the hospital, I wondered if it would be worth continuing to fight, if it wouldn't be easier to simply give up, retreat, let fear win." She paused, looking at the attentive faces in the audience. "But then I realized something fundamental. My pain was not just mine. It was shared by thousands, perhaps millions of women who go through similar situations every day. And if I, who had resources, visibility, support, did not raise my voice, how could I expect other women, without these advantages, to do so?" Michael began to stir in her arms, and she gently adjusted him before continuing. "Today, when I look at my son, I see more than just the baby I love unconditionally. I see a symbol of resilience. He was born from the most difficult circumstances, but he was born healthy, strong, perfect, just as our lives can be reborn, even after the deepest traumas." The lecture continued for another 40 minutes. Camilla spoke about the importance of not accepting abuse disguised as love, about recognizing signs of toxic relationships, about the need for support systems that truly work. She also spoke about family reconciliation, about how her relationship with her father had been rebuilt through humility and mutual forgiveness. Every word resonated with the audience, several people openly crying, identifying with parts of the story. At the end, a 22-year-old student raised her hand during the question session. "How did you manage to forgive? How did you find peace after everything you went through?" Camilla thought carefully before answering. "Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or justifying what was done to me. It means releasing the weight of hatred that only harmed myself. I carried so much anger that it was consuming me from within. When I decided to transform that anger into purpose, into positive action, I found peace. It didn't happen overnight. It was a long process with a lot of psychological support, many difficult conversations with myself. But it happened." She caressed Michael's little head. "True justice is not revenge. It is recovery. It is rebuilding your life in a way that those who hurt you no longer have power over you. It is transforming the victim into a survivor, and the survivor into someone who helps others survive too." The applause was deafening. After the lecture, dozens of people approached wanting to talk, share their own stories, ask for advice. Camilla stayed there for over 2 hours, listening to each one with genuine attention. Some stories were similar to hers, others completely different, but all carried the same common thread of pain and search for overcoming. When she finally left the university, the sun was already setting. Robert was waiting for her in the car. "How was it?" he asked as soon as she got in. "Transformative," Camilla replied, settling Michael into his car seat. "Every time I tell my story, I feel it loses more power over me. It becomes just a story, no longer the definition of who I am. You've grown so much, daughter, Robert said with evident pride in his voice. Sometimes I look at you and barely recognize the stubborn young woman who left home 2 years ago. Camilla smiled. She's still here. She just matured. She understood that stubbornness needs to be accompanied by wisdom. They drove through the city, passing by Heathrow Airport. Camilla looked at Terminal 3 in the distance. That place that was once the scene of her worst nightmare was now just a building. It no longer carried the emotional weight it used to. She had re-signified that memory. That night, the family had dinner together at the mansion. The cook had prepared Camilla's favorite dish, a shepherd's pie that reminded her of her childhood. As they ate, Robert shared news about the foundation's expansion. I received a call from the governor today. He wants to form a public-private partnership to implement our service model throughout the region. It would be a huge leap. Camilla paused with her fork in the air. That's incredible. But we'll need more people, more structure. I'm already taking care of it, Robert assured. I have some businessman friends who have expressed interest in contributing. They were all moved by the work you're doing. After dinner, Camilla took Michael to the garden. The night was starry, the temperature pleasant, the sound of crickets creating a natural symphony. She walked slowly across the lawn, the baby awake, observing everything with curiosity. See those stars, Michael? She pointed to the sky. Each one shines even in the darkness, just like we can shine even after passing through darkness. Robert watched her from the veranda, a glass of wine in his hands. His daughter had become an extraordinary woman, not because of what she had achieved materially, but because of how she transformed trauma into purpose, pain into empathy, apparent weakness into real strength. He thought of all the years he lost due to pride, all the conversations he didn't have, all the moments he let pass. But he also thought about how life had given them a second chance. Months continued to pass. The foundation grew, more units were opened in different regions. Camilla became a national reference in women's rights, was invited to debates in Parliament, participated in international conferences. But she never lost focus on what truly mattered. Every woman who walked through the foundation's door received individualized attention, was treated with dignity, never just another number. Michael grew healthy and happy. At 1 year old, he was already taking his first wobbly steps across the mansion's garden, eliciting laughter from Camilla and Robert. The boy was curious, clever, affectionate. He had no memory of the trauma that marked his first days in the womb, and Camilla would do everything to ensure he grew up in an environment of love and security. On a special afternoon, the foundation organized a commemorative event for its 1 year of operation. The headquarters garden was decorated with flowers, tables were set up, a small stage installed. Hundreds of people attended. Women who had been helped by the foundation, volunteers, donors, supporters, all wanted to celebrate that milestone. Camilla went up to the stage to give a speech. She looked at that crowd of faces, each representing a story of overcoming, and felt her heart overflow with gratitude. Exactly 1 year ago, we inaugurated this space with a dream: to create a place where women in vulnerable situations could find not only assistance, but dignity. Today, I can proudly say that we have helped over 1,200 women. We provided legal assistance for 450 cases. We offered temporary shelter for 130 families. We conducted 2,300 psychological sessions. But numbers don't tell the whole story. The real story is in every smile regained, in every new job opportunity, in every woman who started to believe in herself again. She paused, emotion almost overcoming her. This foundation was born from my pain, but it grew with the strength of all of you. Every volunteer, every donor, every woman who had the courage to ask for help contributed to transforming this place into a beacon of hope. And most importantly, we proved that it is indeed possible to rebuild lives, that trauma is not destiny, that fear does not have to win. The applause was long and emotional. Several women stood up, sharing testimonies of how the foundation had changed their lives. One of them, Anna Paulson, had arrived at the foundation pregnant with twins and fleeing a violent relationship. Today she had a stable job as an administrative assistant, and her daughters were healthy in a partner daycare of the foundation. "I was lost," she said into the microphone. "I thought I would never get out of that cycle. But here I found not only practical help, but people who made me believe I deserved something better." When the event ended and the last guests left, Camilla and Robert remained alone in the now empty garden. The sunset painted the sky orange and pink. Michael slept peacefully in his stroller. Father and daughter stood in silence for a few moments, just appreciating the peace of that instant. "Your mother would be very proud of you," Robert said finally, his voice soft. "She always believed you were destined to do great things. I also believed, but I confess I got lost along the way trying to control what that greatness would be. Thank you for teaching me that true greatness comes from serving, not from dominating." Camilla held her father's hand. "Thank you for coming back when I needed you most, for putting your pride aside and supporting me unconditionally. You taught me that it's never too late to start over, to ask for forgiveness, to build bridges where there were walls." They walked slowly towards the car. The day had been long but rewarding. As they drove back home, Camilla looked out the window, observing the city. London never slept, always moving, always changing, just like her, always evolving, always transforming, always finding new ways to flourish, even amidst the concrete. That night, after putting Michael to sleep, Camilla sat at the desk in her room. She opened a notebook where she had kept a diary since leaving the hospital. In the first pages, the words were laden with pain, fear, confusion. But as the pages advanced, the tone changed. Hope began to emerge between the lines. Purpose began to shape her reflections, and now on the last filled page she simply wrote, "Freedom is remembering." Without pain. I got there. Dear listeners, we hope Camilla and Robert's story has deeply touched your hearts. This narrative teaches us that even in the darkest moments, when all seems lost, there is still a path to light, that from the deepest pain can be born the most significant purpose, and that it is never too late to rebuild bridges, ask for forgiveness, and start over. To continue experiencing intense emotions like this, we have a special playlist with other inspiring stories that will stir your feelings. Find it by clicking here. If this story of overcoming family love and justice touched you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life, the power of resilience, and the strength of the human spirit. Let us know in the comments what moment moved you the most in Camilla's story. Was it the reconciliation with her father Robert? Was it the birth of little Michael? Or was it the creation of the Hope Over Fear Foundation? Share your reflections with us. We look forward to seeing you in the comments.